My name is Callan Mercer, I'm 29, and for most of my adult life, my own family thought I was going nowhere. Not struggling. Not figuring things out. Just nothing. And I let them believe it. I know how that sounds. Stupid. Maybe even pathetic. But if you'd seen the way they look at me back then, the quiet disappointment, the subtle smirks, the way conversations shifted when I walked into a room, you might understand why I stopped correcting them. Or maybe you wouldn't. I don't know. All I know is, the night everything came out, the silence in that room. It wasn't just shock. It was the sound of people realizing they had been completely wrong about someone they thought they had already figured out. And the worst part? By then, I didn't even care anymore. It didn't start out that way. Growing up, I wasn't a failure of the family. Not even close. If anything, I was the quiet one. The observer. My older brother, Derek, was the golden child. Everything about him screamed success before he even earned it. Captain of the football team, loud, confident, the kind of guy who could walk into a room and instantly belong. People loved Derek. My parents? They admired him. And I don't mean that in a bitter way. Not exactly. It's just, there's a difference between loving someone and seeing yourself in them. Derek was my dad's reflection. Same energy. Same voice. Same way of talking over people without realizing it. Then there was me. I like building things. Not physically, though I tried that phase too, but systems. Ideas. Quiet projects that didn't look like much from the outside. I remember once, I spent an entire summer learning how to code from free online resources. Didn't tell anyone. Just did it. At the end of it, I showed my dad a simple app I'd built. He stared at it for maybe 10 seconds. Then he said, "That's nice, Callan. But you should focus on something practical." Something practical. That phrase stuck with me longer than it should have. Things really shifted after college. Derek went straight into a high-paying corporate job. Suit, car, everything. My parents couldn't stop talking about it. Every dinner somehow circled back to him. Derek closed another deal. Derek's boss said he's on track for promotion. Derek's thinking about buying a condo. It was like living in a highlight reel that never ended. And me? I told them I was freelancing. Which, technically, wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth either. Freelancing what? My mom had asked once, her voice polite but thin. Tech stuff, I said. She nodded slowly, like she didn't fully understand, and didn't care enough to ask more. Just make sure it's stable, she replied. Stable. Another word that sounded simple, but carried weight. Here's the thing I didn't tell them. I wasn't just freelancing. I was building something. Something that started small. So small it felt almost embarrassing to talk about. A niche platform. A tool for small businesses to automate parts of their workflow. Nothing flashy. No big funding. No investors. Just me. A laptop. And a lot of late nights. At first, it barely made anything. Then it made a little. Then a bit more. But I kept quiet. Partly because I didn't want to explain something they'd probably dismiss. Partly because I liked the silence. No expectations. No pressure. No comparisons. Just progress. The problem with silence, though, is that people fill it with their own assumptions. And my family? They filled it fast. It started subtly. Comments like, "Must be nice having so much free time. You're still figuring things out, right? At least Derek can help you if you ever need a real job." That last one came from my aunt, Lydia. She said it with a smile. The kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. I laughed it off at the time. I always did. But something about it stayed. Then came the gatherings. Birthdays. Holidays. Random dinners. At some point, I noticed a pattern. Whenever career or money came up, the energy shifted. Derek got questions. Interest. Respect. I got polite silence. Or worse, advice. Unsolicited, constant advice. You should network more. Have you tried applying to companies? You're smart, Callan. You just need direction. Direction. I wanted to say, I have direction. You just don't see it. But I didn't. Because explaining something people already think they understand rarely changes their minds. Looking back, I think that's when the distance really started. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet separation. I stopped sharing. They stopped asking. And somewhere in between, a version of me formed in their minds. The underachiever. The almost there guy. The one who just needed a push. It was easier for them that way. Cleaner. Simpler. But here's the part one still don't fully understand even now. Why did I let it continue? I could have corrected them anytime. Showed them numbers. Growth charts. Contracts. Proof. But I didn't. Maybe I wanted to see how far it would go. Or maybe I was tired of needing their validation in the first place. I don't know. What I do know is, the longer it went on, the harder it became to break that illusion. Because it stopped being just their belief. It became my role. And then came the dinner. The one that changed everything. It was supposed to be simple. My parents' anniversary. Small gathering. Close family only. Nothing dramatic. At least, that's what I thought. But I remember walking in that evening and feeling something slightly off. Not obvious. Just a shift in tone. Like a conversation had been happening before I arrived, and I had just missed it. Derek was already there, leaning back in his chair, confident as always. He gave me a quick nod. Hey, man. Still busy doing whatever it is you do, he joked. Light tone. Casual. But there was something underneath it. Something sharper. I smiled. Yeah. Still at it. He chuckled. One day you'll have to explain it to me. One day. I almost said you wouldn't get it. But I didn't. Instead, I sat down. And that's when my Aunt Lydia leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning me like she was about to say something important. You know, she began, we were just talking about careers before you came in. Of course you were. She smiled. That maybe it's time you think about something more stable. There it was again. Stable. I felt every pair of eyes in that room shift toward me. Waiting. Judging. Expecting. And for a second, I almost told them. Almost. But instead, I just nodded. Yeah, I said quietly. Maybe. And I swear. The relief on their faces? It was instant. Like they'd finally heard what they wanted. That should have been the moment I spoke up. It should have been. But it wasn't. Because something inside me changed right then. Not anger. Not even hurt. Just clarity. I realized they had already decided who I was. And no explanation was going to undo that. Not yet. So I let them believe it. For a little longer. Just a little. Because I had a feeling. A strong one. That when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't need explaining. And it didn't. I didn't say anything that night. Not when my aunt kept circling back to my future. Not when my mom gently suggested I could shadow Derek at work for a week. Not even when my dad, who rarely got directly involved, said, almost casually, "You've always had potential, Callan. You just need to apply it somewhere that matters." That one sat heavier than the rest. Somewhere that matters. I remember nodding. Smiling, even. But inside, something shifted again. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet decision forming. After dinner, I stepped outside for some air. It was colder than I expected. One of those nights where the air feels sharper than usual, like it's trying to wake you up. I stood there longer than I needed to. I don't know why, but I kept replaying that sentence. Somewhere that matters. Maybe I was wrong, but it felt like they had already measured my life and found it lacking. And the weird part? I wasn't even angry anymore. Just detached. Behind me, the door creaked open. Hey. It was Derek. Of course it was. He stepped out, hands in his pockets, that same confident posture he always had even when it was just the two of us. "You okay?" he asked. Simple question. But the tone? It wasn't concern. It was curiosity. Like he was trying to figure something out. "Yeah," I said. "Just needed some air." He nodded slowly, then leaned against the railing beside me. There was a pause. Then he said it. "You know they worry about you, right?" I let out a small breath. "Do they?" "Yeah," he shrugged. "I mean, you're almost 30, man. No steady job, no clear direction." There it was again. That version of me. The one they had all agreed on. I looked at him for a second. And for the first time in a long time, I really saw him. Not the golden child. Not the successful brother. Just Derek. Confident, sure. But also certain in a way that comes from never being questioned. "You ever think," I said slowly, "that maybe I'm doing something you just don't see?" He smirked. Not cruelly. Just dismissively. "Come on, Callan," he said. "If you were doing something big, we'd know." That sentence? Yeah. That one stayed. "If you were doing something big, we'd know." I didn't respond. Because arguing would have been pointless. Instead, I just nodded. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe." He clapped my shoulder, like the conversation was settled. "Look, if you ever want help getting into something more stable, just tell me," he added. More stable. I almost laughed. But I didn't. "Sure," I said. And that was it. That night. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was upset. But because my mind wouldn't slow down. I kept thinking about everything, every comment, every look, every assumption. And somewhere between those thoughts, I realized something I hadn't fully admitted to myself before. I had outgrown them. Not emotionally. Not completely. But in terms of how they saw the world? Yeah. I was somewhere else now. And they had no idea. The next morning, I woke up early. Earlier than usual. Made coffee. Sat at my desk. Opened my laptop. And just stared at the dashboard. Numbers. Graphs. Growth metrics. Things that, to anyone else, would look complicated or boring. But to me, they told a story. A very different story than the one my family believed. Revenue had tripled in the last 6 months. User base? Growing faster than I had predicted. New contracts? Quietly stacking up. And then there was the email. The one I hadn't responded to yet. From a company that wanted to acquire my platform. A serious offer. The kind of offer that would change things completely. I had been sitting on it for days. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because accepting it would mean stepping out of the shadows. No more freelancing. No more ambiguity. Just truth. I don't know why, but I hovered over that email for a long time. Maybe I was hesitating. Or maybe I was waiting. Waiting for something to push me. And then my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. Hey, your Uncle Ravi is visiting next weekend. We're having a family dinner. You'll come, right? Another dinner. Another round of the same conversations. The same looks. The same assumptions. I stared at the message. Then typed. Yeah. I'll be there. That's when it hit me. Clear. Simple. Unavoidable. I wasn't avoiding telling them the truth because I was unsure. I was waiting for the right moment. And that dinner? Yeah. That felt like it. But here's the thing about moments like that. They rarely go the way you expect. The week leading up to it was strange. Everything in my life outside of my family was accelerating. Calls. Meetings. Negotiations. That acquisition offer? It got better. Then better again. At one point, I had to just sit back and laugh. Because if anyone from my family could see what my unstable freelancing actually looked like, they wouldn't know what to do with it. But I still didn't tell them. Not yet. Because now, it wasn't just about correcting them. It was about timing. And something in me wanted that moment to land. Fully. Friday night. The dinner. I arrived a little later than usual. Not intentionally. Just work ran over. When I walked in, the house was already full. Voices. Laughter. Movement. That familiar energy. But again, something felt off. Stronger this time. More focused. Callan, my mom called out, smiling as she saw me. You made it. Yeah, I said, stepping inside. Then I noticed it. Everyone was already seated. Like they had been waiting. For me. I don't know why, but my chest tightened slightly. Just a little. I greeted everyone, took my seat. And for a few minutes, everything felt normal. Too normal. Small talk. Food. Laughter. Then my Uncle Ravi, who had always been the more direct one, leaned back in his chair and looked straight at me. So, Callan, he said, his tone calm but pointed. What exactly do you do these days? There it was. Not casual. Not passing. Direct. Intentional. And suddenly, the room went quiet. Not completely silent. But quiet enough. Forks paused. Eyes shifted. Waiting. I felt it. That familiar pressure. The expectation. The version of me they all believed in. Standing right there in front of them. For a second. I almost gave them the same answer I always did. Freelancing. Tech stuff. Easy. Safe. Predictable. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the week I'd had. Maybe it was Derek's words. If you were doing something big, we'd know. I looked around the table. At my parents. At Derek. At my Aunt Lydia. All of them watching. All of them certain they already knew the answer. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to protect that version of myself anymore. So I leaned back slightly. Took a breath. And said, well, that depends. You could feel it. That shift. Small. But real. On what? My uncle asked. I paused for just a second. Not for effect. Just choosing my words. On whether you want the simple answer or the honest one. The moment I said it, I felt it. That shift. It was subtle, but it moved through the room like a ripple. People straightened a little. Forks lowered. Even the background noise, the clinking, the small side conversations, just faded. I don't know why, but my heart didn't race. If anything, I felt steady. Too steady. My Uncle Ravi raised an eyebrow. Well, he said, leaning back slightly, I think we can handle the honest one. A few people chuckled softly. Not in a mocking way. More like they thought I was joking. That this was going to be one of those awkward, slightly defensive explanations. Something they could nod through and move on from. I glanced at Derek. He had that same half-smile on his face. The one he used when he already thought he knew how something was going to play out. Like he was waiting for me to confirm the version of me he had in his head. I took a breath. I build software, I said. Simple. Clear. Not new. A few nods around the table. Right, tech stuff, my Aunt Lydia added quickly, almost relieved. Freelancing, you said. I shook my head. Not exactly. There it was again. That shift. A little sharper this time. I started building a platform a few years ago, I continued. For small businesses. Automation, workflow management, things like that. I kept my tone even. Conversational. Like I was explaining something ordinary. Because to me, it was. But to them? It wasn't landing yet. You could see it. They were listening, but still fitting my words into the same old box. Small project. Side thing. Nothing serious. So like an app? Derek asked, tilting his head slightly. Yeah, I said. You could call it that. And people use it, he added, a hint of amusement creeping in. I nodded. Yeah. They do. Silence again. But this time, it lingered a little longer. My uncle leaned forward. How many people are we talking about? That was the first real question. The first moment someone stepped outside their assumption. I hesitated. Not because I didn't know. But because I knew the answer would change the room. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, I said slowly. A few thousand active users. More registered. The reaction wasn't immediate. It came in pieces. A blink here. A glance there. Like their brains needed a second to process it. A few thousand, my mom repeated softly. I nodded. Yeah. Derek let out a small laugh. Not loud. Not mean. Just disbelieving. Okay, he said, leaning back. That's actually impressive. But even then, you could tell. He still didn't fully buy it. Not yet. And it's profitable, my dad asked. That question? That one carried weight. Because to him, that's what made something real. I looked at him. Then nodded. Yeah. It is. How profitable? Aunt Lydia asked quickly. Too quickly. I paused. And for the first time, I felt it. That edge. That thin line between explaining and revealing. Enough, I said, that I haven't needed another job in over 2 years. This time, the silence hit differently. Heavier. More focused. I noticed my mom's expression change. Just slightly. Her smile faded into something more uncertain. Derek sat up a little straighter now. The amusement? Gone. Replaced with something else. Curiosity. Maybe even a little tension. Wait, he said, so this isn't just a side thing? I shook my head. No. Another pause. And you've been doing this the whole time, he asked. Yeah. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger. Just recalibrating. You never mentioned any of this, he said. It wasn't an accusation. But it wasn't neutral either. I shrugged. I tried, early on. That was true. Just not the whole truth. No one spoke for a moment. And then? My uncle broke it. So what kind of numbers are we talking about, Callan? There it was. The question. The one that moves things from abstract to undeniable. I looked around the table again. At all of them. And suddenly, I remembered every comment. Every assumption. Every quiet dismissal. Something more stable. If you were doing something big, we'd know. I don't know why, but I almost smiled. Just a little. Monthly? I asked. My uncle nodded. I exhaled. Then said it. Low six figures. No one moved. No one spoke. It was like the room forgot how. My mom blinked. Once. Twice. 6 figures, she repeated, barely above a whisper. I nodded. Yeah. Derek just stared at me. Completely still. Like his brain hadn't caught up yet. That's not, he started, then stopped. Tried again. That's not possible from just. He cut himself off. Because even he knew how that sounded. My dad leaned forward slowly. His expression had changed the most. Not shock. Not exactly. More like realization. And this is consistent, he asked. Yeah, I said. It's been growing. Another silence. Longer this time. Deeper. And then? Something I didn't expect. My Aunt Lydia, who always had something to say, said nothing. She just sat there. Looking at me. Like she was trying to match this version of me with the one she thought she knew. And failing. I don't know how long it lasted. A few seconds, maybe. But it felt longer. Because in that moment, everything shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. They weren't looking at me the same way anymore. And the strange part? I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't even feel satisfied. Because the truth was finally out. And it hadn't required anything extra. No convincing. No arguing. No proving. Just truth. But the night? Yeah. It wasn't over. Not even close. Because once people realize they've been wrong about you for a long time, they don't just accept it. They react. No one spoke for a while after that. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful. The kind that feels crowded. Like everyone's thinking too much at the same time, and no one wants to be the first to say the wrong thing. I picked up my glass. Took a sip of water. It tasted normal. Which felt strange, considering the room didn't. Then my mom finally said it. Softly. Why didn't you tell us? Not angry. Not accusing. Just confused. I looked at her. And for a second, I didn't answer. Because there were a lot of possible responses. I tried. You didn't listen. You already decided who I was. All of them true. None of them useful. I don't know, I said finally. Which wasn't entirely a lie. She nodded slowly, like she was trying to accept that answer, even if it didn't fully make sense to her. But Derek? He wasn't letting it go that easily. So let me get this straight, he said, leaning forward now, elbows on the table. You've been making, what, hundreds of thousands a year? Not exactly, I said. Revenue isn't the same as. But still, he cut in. That kind of money. There it was again. The shift. Not curiosity anymore. Something else. I guess, I said. He stared at me for a second. Then leaned back again. Exhaled. Wow. But it didn't sound impressed. It sounded unsettled. And that's when it started. Not all at once. Just small things. So is it like a company? My uncle asked. Yeah, I said. I mean, it's just me right now. But. Just you? Aunt Lydia interrupted, her voice sharper now. And you're making that much? I nodded. She exchanged a glance with my mom. Quick. Subtle. But I saw it. How did we not know any of this? She murmured, more to the table than to me. I didn't answer. Because the real answer wouldn't land well. Instead, I said, I kept it low-key. Low-key? Derek repeated, a hint of a laugh slipping out again. You call that low-key? I shrugged. I didn't think it mattered. That landed. Harder than I expected. Because now, it wasn't just about what I had done. It was about what I hadn't shared. And for some reason, that bothered them more. You didn't think it mattered? My dad said slowly. His tone wasn't harsh. But it was deliberate. I met his eyes. Not really, no. Another silence. And then? The question started changing. So what are you planning to do with it? My uncle asked. Grow it, I said. Or, maybe sell. Sell, my mom repeated. Yeah. I've had some offers. That did it. That was the moment everything tipped. Offers? Derek said quickly. Like from who? Companies in the space, I said. Nothing finalized. How much? Aunt Lydia asked. There it was. No hesitation this time. No softening. Just direct. I paused. Not because I didn't want to say it. But because I knew what it would trigger. Enough to walk away, I said. That's not an answer, Derek pushed. I looked at him. Then said it. 7 figures. This time, it wasn't silence. It was impact. My mom's hand froze midair. My dad leaned back slowly. My uncle just stared. And Derek? Yeah. That was the first time I saw it. He blinked. Once. Then again. Like something inside him had just slipped. 7 figures, he repeated. I nodded. For your app? I didn't correct him this time. Yes. And just like that. Everything changed. Not subtly. Not quietly. Completely. Because now, it wasn't just surprising. It was undeniable. And people don't react calmly to that. They react emotionally. Well, that's incredible, my mom said, but her voice didn't fully match the word. There was pride there. But also something else. Something quieter. Something like distance. My uncle leaned forward again. So you're saying you might be, what, a millionaire? I haven't sold anything yet, I said. So? But you could be, he insisted. I didn't answer. Because technically, yeah. And then it happened. The shift I didn't expect. So, Aunt Lydia said slowly, folding her hands together. If things are going that well. She trailed off. But the implication? Yeah. It was clear. You must have quite a bit saved, she added. There it was. Not curiosity. Not pride. Calculation. I felt it immediately. That subtle change in tone. That new kind of attention. And I don't know why, but something in my chest tightened. Not because of the question itself. But because of what it meant. We weren't talking about me anymore. We were talking about what I had. I manage, I said. She smiled. That same familiar smile. But now it looked different. Well, she said lightly, it's good to know someone in the family is doing that well. Someone. Not you. And just like that. The admiration? It twisted. Because now, it came with expectation. Derek leaned forward again. More serious this time. So what's the plan? He asked. You cash out, and then what? I don't know, I said honestly. I'll figure it out. He nodded slowly. But I could see it. He wasn't just asking. He was measuring. Comparing. Recalculating where he stood, next to me. And that? Yeah. That changed things more than anything else. Because for the first time in our lives, I wasn't behind him anymore. And he knew it. The rest of the dinner? It kept going. But not the same way. Conversations felt forced. Questions felt loaded. Every word I said got a little more attention than before. And underneath it all, there was something building. And I had a feeling that it wasn't going to stay subtle for long. Dinner should have ended there. Honestly, it would have been cleaner if it had. People would have gone home confused, maybe impressed, maybe a little uncomfortable, but that would have been it. Instead, dessert came out. And with it, the real conversation. I was halfway through a slice of cake when my mom said, almost casually, you know, your cousin Neil's been struggling a bit with work lately. I paused. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Light. Careful. Placed. Oh. I said. Yeah, she continued. He's been trying to start something of his own, but you know how hard that is. I nodded slowly. Yeah. I did. Across the table, my Aunt Lydia added, he just needs a little push. The right opportunity. There it was. That word again. Opportunity. I set my fork down. Something about the air felt different now. More focused. What kind of opportunity? I asked. They exchanged a quick look. Just a second. But enough. Well, Lydia said, smiling again, someone with your experience could probably guide him. Maybe even bring him into what you're doing? There it was. The first ask. It wasn't aggressive. Not yet. Wrapped in support. Framed as help. But underneath? Yeah, it was something else. I don't think that's a good fit, I said, keeping my tone even. The reaction was immediate. Not loud. But noticeable. Oh, my mom said, a little surprised. Why not? I shrugged slightly. It's a specific system. Not something you just plug people into. That's exactly why he'd benefit from learning from you, Lydia pushed gently. I shook my head. It doesn't really work like that. A pause. Short. Tight. And then Derek spoke. Come on, Callan, he said, leaning forward again. It wouldn't kill you to help him out a bit. Help him out. I looked at him. Really looked this time. And something about his tone felt different. Not brotherly. Not supportive. Expectant. I'm not against helping, I said slowly. But this isn't something I can just hand over or bring someone into without it making sense. He frowned slightly. What does that even mean? It means it's not that simple. Then my uncle sighed. You know, he said, this is what family is for. There it was. The shift. Clear now. Not curiosity. Not even admiration anymore. Obligation. I felt it settle in the room. Heavy. Unspoken, but understood. I leaned back slightly. Took a breath. I get that, I said. But helping doesn't always mean involving someone in your work. And what does it mean then? Lydia asked. I paused. Because the honest answer wasn't what they wanted. It means supporting them in a way that actually works, I said. Not forcing something that doesn't. Her smile faded. Just a little. Well, she said, her tone tightening, it just seems like now that you're doing well, you're being a bit selective. Selective. That word landed harder than I expected. Before I could respond, Derek let out a short laugh. Yeah, he said. Funny how that works, right? I turned to him. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged. Nothing. Just when you needed direction, everyone here was willing to help you. That stopped me. Because it wasn't true. Not really. But the way he said it. Confident. Certain. Like it had always been that way. I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger. Not fully. Just something sharper. I don't remember that, I said quietly. The table went still again. Derek blinked. What? I don't remember anyone offering to help me build anything, I said. Mostly just advice to do something else. That hit. You could see it. My dad shifted slightly in his seat. My mom looked down at her plate. But Lydia? She didn't back off. Well, we were trying to guide you towards something stable, she said. You can't blame us for that. I nodded slowly. I'm not blaming anyone. Then what are you saying? She pressed. I held her gaze for a second. Then said it. I'm saying, no one really believed in what I was doing. Derek leaned back again, crossing his arms. Well, he said, his tone flatter now, it's hard to believe in something when you don't show anything. There it was. The justification. The reason it was okay to dismiss me. I nodded. Yeah, I said. That's fair. And for a second it almost diffused things. But then Lydia spoke again. So now that we do know, she said, you can't expect us not to think about how it could help the family. And that? Yeah. That was the moment everything turned. Because she didn't mean emotionally. She didn't mean support. She meant, materially. I felt it clearly now. That shift from you to what you can provide. And something inside me? Yeah. It finally settled. I think, I said slowly, that's exactly what I can expect. The words landed quietly. But they hit. Her expression tightened. What does that mean? It means what I've built, I said, isn't something the family gets to divide up just because you know about it now. No one spoke. Because now, it wasn't subtle anymore. Lines had been drawn. And everyone at that table? They felt it. Derek's jaw tightened slightly. My uncle leaned back, folding his arms. My mom looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't know what. And Lydia? She just stared at me. Like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. But not in the way I expected. Not with respect. With resistance. Well, she said finally, her voice cooler now, I didn't realize you'd become so guarded. I almost smiled. Yeah, I said. Neither did I. And that was it. The moment the conversation stopped being about success. And started being about control. No one picked up their fork after that. Dessert sat there, untouched. Half-eaten slices, melting edges, crumbs scattered across plates, like the conversation had physically interrupted everything. And in a way, it had. I could feel it. You don't always recognize it when it's coming, but once it's there. Yeah. There's no going back to normal. My dad cleared his throat. That low, familiar sound he used when things were about to get serious. All right, he said, looking between me and the rest of the table, I think we're getting a little off track here. Off track. I almost laughed. Because this? This was the most honest the conversation had been in years. No, it's fine, I said quietly. We're not off track. He looked at me for a moment. Like he was deciding whether to push back. Then he didn't. Derek leaned forward again, slower this time. More controlled. No one's trying to take anything from you, he said. You're acting like we are. I tilted my head slightly. Then what are you trying to do? He hesitated. We're just saying. If you're in a position to help, why wouldn't you? There it was again. Same sentence. Different tone. Help how? I asked. He exhaled. Like the answer should be obvious. Opportunities. Guidance. Maybe even some financial backing if it makes sense. There it was. Out loud now. Okay, I said. So you're asking me to invest in Neil? Derek shrugged. Or at least consider it. I looked across the table. At my Aunt Lydia. She didn't say anything this time. But her eyes? Yeah. They were locked on me. Waiting. And suddenly, everything clicked. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a casual conversation that just happened. They had talked about this before I got there. Planned it. Maybe not every word. But the direction? Yeah. That was decided. I leaned back in my chair. Took a slow breath. I'm not investing, I said. Simple. Clear. The reaction? Immediate. Why not? Lydia asked, sharper now. Because I don't invest in things I don't believe in, I said. And you don't believe in your own cousin, she shot back. I didn't flinch. I don't know his business, I replied. That's not the same thing. She opened her mouth again. But Derek cut in. This isn't just about business, Callan, he said. This is about family. I nodded. I know. Then act like it. That one? Yeah. That one hit differently. Not because it was harsh. But because it was revealing. I sat there for a second. Then said, calmly. I am. Derek frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm being honest, I said. And not pretending something makes sense when it doesn't. He leaned back, shaking his head slightly. Unbelievable, he muttered. And that's when something small, but important happened. My mom finally spoke again. Callan, she said softly, no one's asking you to do something unreasonable. I looked at her. Really looked this time. And I don't know why, but I noticed something I hadn't before. She wasn't just hopeful. She was expecting. Like this outcome had already been decided in her mind. I think you are, I said gently. Her expression shifted. How? She asked. I hesitated. Because this part. This was where it got personal. Because none of this came up before tonight, I said. Not when you thought I was struggling. Not when you thought I had nothing going on. No one moved. You didn't ask how I was managing, I continued. You didn't ask what I was building. My voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. But now that you know it worked, I added, suddenly there's all these ways I can help. That landed hard. My dad looked down. My mom blinked rapidly. And for the first time, Lydia didn't have an immediate response. Derek, though? Yeah. He wasn't backing down. That's not fair, he said. I looked at him. Isn't it? We didn't know, he insisted. I tried to tell you, I said. You said, freelancing, he shot back. Yeah. And no one asked anything beyond that. And then? Something shifted again. But this time? It wasn't tension. It was realization. And then my dad spoke. We might have underestimated you. That sentence? Yeah. That one mattered. Not because it fixed anything. But because it was the first honest thing anyone had said all night. I nodded once. That's okay. And I meant it. But Derek? He let out a short breath. So what, now we're just what? Supposed to act like none of this matters, he said. I shook my head. No, I said. It matters. Then why does it feel like you're pushing us away, he asked. That question hung there. Because it wasn't aggressive. Not really. It was frustrated. And maybe, for the first time, a little uncertain. I thought about it. Actually thought. Then said. I'm not pushing anyone away. A pause. I'm just not stepping into a role that was never mine to begin with. No one spoke. Because that? Yeah. That was the truth they weren't ready for. I wasn't the struggling one anymore. And I wasn't the solution to their problems either. I was just me. And for some reason, that was the hardest thing for them to accept. The rest of the night ended quietly. Too quietly. No more big questions. No more pushing. Just distance. People said their goodbyes. Shorter than usual. Less warmth. Derek gave me a nod on the way out. Not cold. Not friendly either. Just different. And my mom? She hugged me. Held on a little longer than usual. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I believed her. But I also knew that wasn't the whole story. Because pride doesn't erase expectations. And something told me this wasn't over. Not even close. The days after that dinner felt strange. Too quiet. I don't know why, but I kept expecting something. A call. A confrontation. Another talk. But nothing came. At first, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe things would just settle into a new normal. Different, sure. But manageable. I was wrong. It started small. A message from my mom. Hey, do you think you could take a quick look at something for Neil? Just advice. Just advice. I stared at the message for a while. Not annoyed. Just tired. I typed back. I can take a look. No promises. That felt fair. She replied almost instantly. That would mean a lot. And I don't know why, but that line stuck with me. Not in a good way. Not in a bad way either. Just somewhere in between. A few hours later, I got an email from Neil. Long. Detailed. Messy. Business idea, projections, plans, everything thrown together like he was trying to prove something more than build something. I read through it slowly. Twice. And here's the thing. It wasn't terrible. But it wasn't solid either. Too many assumptions. Not enough structure. No real understanding of execution. I could have said that. Bluntly. Directly. But I didn't. Instead, I wrote back with feedback. Clear. Honest. Specific. What worked? What didn't? What needed to change? I even offered a short call. 15 minutes. Nothing more. He replied. Thanks, but I was actually hoping you could invest. Even a small amount would help me get started. There it was again. Money. I leaned back in my chair. Stared at the screen. I don't know why, but I felt disappointed. Maybe I was wrong, but I had hoped, just a little, that this would be different. I typed back. I don't invest in early ideas without traction. Focus on building something first. He didn't reply. But that wasn't the end of it. Because later that night, my phone rang. Derek. I almost didn't pick up. But I did. Hey, I said. He didn't waste time. So you turned Neil down? Straight to it. I gave him feedback, I said. That's not what I asked. I exhaled slowly. No. I didn't invest. A pause. Then. Why? Same question. Different tone this time. Not curious. Not frustrated. Sharp. I already explained that, I said. Yeah, I saw your message, he replied. About traction. Something about the way he said it. Like it was a weak excuse. You don't think that's a valid reason? I asked. I think, he said slowly, you're making it harder than it needs to be. I sat up slightly. How? It's family, he said. Not some random pitch. There it was again. That word. Like it was supposed to override everything else. I don't treat business differently based on who someone is, I said. Maybe you should, he shot back. And that? Yeah. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't about Neil anymore. This was about something else. You're not really talking about him, are you? I said. Silence. Then. What's that supposed to mean? I leaned back. It means this bothers you more than it should. Another pause. Longer this time. Then he laughed. Short. Dry. Of course it bothers me, he said. You come out of nowhere, suddenly you're making more than everyone, and now you can't even help your own family. There it was. Comparison. Finally, out in the open. I didn't respond right away. Because now I understood. This wasn't about money. It was about where I stood. And where he thought he stood, compared to me. I didn't come out of nowhere, I said quietly. I've been doing this for years. You just didn't see it. That's not the point, he said quickly. It kind of is, I replied. Silence again. Then. So what, you're just better than us now? I closed my eyes for a second. No, I said. That's not what this is. Then what is it, he pushed. I opened my eyes. Stared at the wall for a second. Then said it. It's me not being who you thought I was. No response. Just breathing on the other end. And then? A quieter voice. Yeah, well, he said, maybe that's the problem. The call ended not long after that. No resolution. No agreement. Just distance. And strangely, I felt lighter. Not because things were better. But because things were clear. Over the next few weeks, that clarity spread. Fewer messages. Fewer calls. Less expectation. And something else started happening too. People outside my family? They kept showing up. Clients. Partners. New opportunities. Respect that wasn't based on history. Or assumptions. Just reality. And it made something painfully obvious. The version of me my family had struggled to accept. The world had no problem with it. That realization? Yeah. That stayed. But here's the thing about karma. It doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes, it's quiet. And sometimes, it takes its time. A month passed. Then a little more. And for the first time in years, my life felt quiet in a good way. Not the kind of silence filled with assumptions. Not the kind where you feel like you're being watched, measured, compared. Just space. Work kept growing. Steadily. Naturally. No big announcements. No dramatic moments. Just progress. I didn't sell the company. Not yet. The offer was still there, actually better than before, but something in me wasn't in a rush anymore. Funny how that works. When you stop needing to prove something, your decisions get clearer. I hadn't heard from Derek since that call. Not a text. Not a follow-up. Just nothing. My mom checked in occasionally. Short messages. How are you? Are you eating properly? I saw something today that reminded me of you. Normal things. Safe things. We didn't talk about that dinner again. Not directly. And maybe that was for the best. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. Derek. I stared at the screen for a second. I let it ring twice. Then picked up. Hey. There was a pause on the other end. Longer than usual. Hey, he said. His voice? Different. Less certain. Less sharp. What's up? I asked. I wanted to talk, he said. Of course he did. Okay, I replied. About what? He exhaled. I could hear it clearly. I think I messed up, he said. That wasn't what I expected. Not because he never admitted things. But because, not like this. Not first. I didn't say anything. Just waited. At dinner. And after, he continued. I was off. Off. That was one way to put it. I didn't handle it well, he added. I leaned back in my chair. Look out the window. I appreciate you saying that, I said. I think, he said slowly, I got thrown. By what? I asked. You, he said. I almost smiled. Didn't expect that, I replied. Yeah, no kidding, he let out a small, quiet laugh. I mean, I thought I had you figured out. There it was again. That idea. I know, I said. And then suddenly. You didn't fit that anymore, he added. Yeah. Another pause. I think it made me feel like he hesitated, searching for the word, like I was behind somehow. Honest. Finally. That's not how I see it, I said. I know, he replied quickly. But it's how it felt. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. And the whole Neil thing, he continued, I pushed that harder than I should've. Yeah, I said. I'm sorry, he added. Simple. Direct. No excuses. And for some reason, that mattered more than anything he could have said before. Thanks, I said. We sat in that moment for a second. Then he spoke again. I'm not calling to ask for anything, by the way, he said. No favors. No investments. Nothing like that. I believed him. I just didn't want things to stay like that between us, he finished. That part? Yeah. That landed. Because underneath everything, he was still my brother. I don't want that either, I said. And I meant it. We talked a little longer. Nothing heavy. Nothing strategic. Just normal. And when the call ended, something felt settled. Not perfect. But real. A few days later, I got a message from my mom. Dinner this weekend? Just us. I thought about it. Not long. Then replied. Yeah. I'll come. This time, it felt different walking in. Not tense. Not stage. Just quieter. Smaller table. Fewer people. No audience. My dad greeted me at the door. Gave me a firm pat on the shoulder. Good to see you, he said. Good to see you too, I replied. We sat down. Ate. Talked. Normal things again. Work. Life. Random stories. And then, somewhere in between all of that, my mom looked at me. I meant what I said, she said softly. I'm proud of you. This time, it felt different. Not layered with expectation. Not tied to anything else. Just pride. Thanks, I said. My dad nodded slightly. You built something on your own, he added. That matters. There it was. That word again. But now, it sounded different. Not like a condition. Not like a requirement. Just acknowledgement. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as the one who needed direction. Not as the quiet one figuring things out. Just me. Looking back now, I don't regret staying quiet as long as I did. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have said something earlier. But if I had, they might have heard the words. But they wouldn't have felt the shift. And that's the thing about truth. Sometimes, it needs timing. Not to prove anything, but to reveal everything. I still haven't sold the company. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But it's not about that anymore. It's not about numbers. Or who's ahead. Or who was right. It's about knowing who I am. Without needing anyone else to confirm it. And if there's one thing that whole experience taught me, it's this. People will build a version of you in their heads. Sometimes without even realizing it. And you can spend years trying to correct it. Or You can quietly become someone that version can't contain anymore. And when that happens, you don't have to say much. Because the truth speaks for itself. A few months later, Neil sent me another email. Short this time. Clearer. Better. No request for money. No shortcuts. Just, I think I understand what you meant now. I'm building first. I smiled when I read that. Not because I had been right. But because something had shifted. And maybe that's how it spreads. Not through pressure. Not through obligation. But through example. Just like everything else.